For all verified facts, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome. The number of COVID-19 cases across India are now over 200,000. It is hitting records everywhere across the country. Now, in some states like Gujarat, where cases have also hit new highs, 7,400 plus in this state, there seems to be an unusual occurrence in as much as the number of people who are dying are not matching with the numbers that are being put out by the state government authorities, and particularly the local authorities in cities like Ahmedabad, Rajkot, Surat, and others. Now, that may be a slightly specific problem, but this seems to be happening in many other parts of the country as well. So there are two questions that we are trying to address in today's conversation. The first is what is happening in Gujarat, and is that symptomatic of something larger, which is that a lot of people seem to be succumbing to COVID-19. Is it a mutational problem challenge, or is it something else, or is it just that the numbers are not adding up vis-a-vis other parts of the country? And the second is the larger question on considering that we seem to be in the heat of the second wave of this pandemic, what could be the way forward, including on vaccination, which seems to be largely the only solution that we have at hand, but implementing that solution will also take some tact and strategy. So to discuss that, I am joined by two experts, Dr. Dilip Mavalankar, Director of the Indian Institute of Public Health in Gandhinagar. Dr. Mavalankar is also a Master's and Doctorate in Public Health from the Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health. We are also joined by, to give us a more ground view of Ahmedabad, Dr. Sanket Mankad, an infectious diseases consultant who as long back or as recently as November 2020 was quoted saying that we should be worried and focused on the second wave that was imminent. So these are the questions I've already outlined. So let's start off with you, Dr. Mavalankar. I spoke to you last year, which seems like a long time ago, in August, when you had done a study looking at the prevalence of the disease within families, and one of your findings or key findings at that time was that the disease was not spreading as intensely within families as it was spreading perhaps outside, and 70 to 80% of cases family members were not affected. So that was perhaps one, let's say, behavior of the virus mutation at that time. How have things changed, and where are we today?
Yeah, I think what we see is in this second wave, at least anecdotally, we know that many more families are affected, whole families, or only one person is not affected and rest of the family is affected. So that seems to be much more common. Of course, we are planning to do a similar study as we did. We have asked for government permissions to access the data, and then we will start that study. The second change which we see is the rapid rise in cases. The first wave started in March, April, and it peaked in September. Whereas this wave has started in middle of February and is yet not peaked, and rapidly surpassed last year's wave by a margin of 2 times more. So that is the second major change which we are seeing. The third major change, and which is more younger people are affected, and Dr. Sanket may speak about it in this wave than the previous wave. Of course, mortality, the numbers seems to be now catching up. Earlier there was low mortality. Now it seems that mortality is also rapidly increasing in this wave. The fourth thing, which at least anecdotally again, is the rural areas are also getting quite a few number of cases. If you see, the spread of the disease in rural areas was not so much in the previous wave, but it is quite a bit in this wave. And in spite of having less testing, because testing is also less in the rural areas as compared to big urban cities, but still there are many more cases coming up. So these are the key changes, right, which we are seeing.
Right. Dr. Mankad, tell us how you are seeing the changes and the shifts that Dr. Mavalankar referred to as well, particularly as someone who is treating patients and seeing the changes at the front lines.
Thank you very much, and namaste. I think the major change that we are observing currently as clinicians and infectious disease specialists is that I think the virulence of the virus is a bit higher as compared to that of the previous one. I think the virus that we saw in last year, April, May, and November and October. I think this virus is pretty virulent. As Dr. Mavlankar very rightly said, that currently you find the entire families to be positive, right? One more thing is this, that young adults are also being infected. Earlier, the young adults were relatively safer. Secondly, the virulence of the virus in the younger adults is also currently predominant, and it's a bit worrying thing that younger adults are developing pneumonia pretty faster. One more thing is the altered coagulability of blood secondary to COVID-19 infection is also notable in this particular subset of the patients. One more thing is that the ERDS, that is the lung infiltrates developed in both the lungs, also is increasing in young adults. So that is a point to ponder about in this particular second wave that we are seeing. Currently, the second wave that we are seeing is by and large restricted to all the four major cities of Gujarat, that is Ahmedabad, Rajkot, Vadodara, and Surat. And as Mavlankar Saab said, that the peripheries are also not spared in this particular second wave. One notable thing regarding this particular second wave, again, what I would like to say is the unusual presentation of the cases, right? The patients are presenting with diarrhea, acute diarrhea, dehydration, multi-organ involvement. In children, you find multi-system inflammatory syndromes. Earlier, in the earlier phases, we were not seeing children getting infected. But here, young mothers, that is between 35 to 45, are also getting infected. And subsequent transmission, that is secondary attack rate, on towards the children also is being increasingly seen. So these are the differences in the clinical presentation of the patient profile that we are seeing as clinicians.
Right, and tell us about what we are seeing. I mean, this may be more visuals and television visuals, but we are seeing ambulances lined up outside hospitals, and of course ambulances also waiting to cremate people. And why is that? I mean, why is there such a surge? And is it because people never tested themselves and therefore did not get treatment in time, or something else?
Well, you must go into the past a little bit. If you see in January and February, there was a drastic fall in the number of active cases. And I think that was documented by each and every one. January and February were at the lowest of the peaks. And therefore, there is something called, what I call is pandemic fatigue that sets in. And we are already into the midst of 1 year and a quarter into the pandemic, right? And therefore, see, we human beings are social animals. Right. So social distancing can be practiced at a certain level. So when people found that the cases are low, the weddings happened, the get-togethers happened, right? And all sorts of gatherings did occur during that particular period of time. And one more thing is that I think we definitely forgot as people the importance of SMS, that is social distancing, mask, and sanitization, right? One more thing, vaccination was introduced. So that also might introduce a false sense of insecurity into certain group of people who received vaccine, right? So these all are the factors that contributed towards the indifference towards the development of that particular second wave, which was definitely an impending second wave. One more thing. Okay, go on. Tell me. Ask your next question.
So just to come back to the symptoms that you mentioned. I mean, you talked about blood condition as well as lung conditions in younger people. Now, are you saying that these are more prevalent in younger and not seen in older people, including in the first wave?
No, definitely. See, elderly, diabetics, particularly senior citizens, diabetics, hypertensive, patients with coronary artery disease, they definitely are prone to develop bilateral pneumonia and ERDS. They are definitely presenting with these things. But earlier the wave, during the first wave, the younger adults were not this highly susceptible, right? The clinical implications of this thing is that the virulence of the virus, COVID-19, might have increased in this particular setting. That is what I want to say. One more thing that we need to think about also is that the sequencing of this particular virus also needs to be done, because whether it has changed its genetic structure has it undergone any mutation? Has it acquired new virulence factors? Has it acquired new factors which are evading the host immune systems and thereby enhancing the attachment of the virus to the respiratory epithelium? Is it attaching more toward the gastrointestinal epithelium and developing a multi-system disorder? Also needs to be ascertained by doing a detailed DNA sequencing of this particular virus, whether we are facing this particular Wuhan virus that was there during the initial first wave, or is it a variant, or is it a mixture of variants, that is the UK, the Brazil, and the South African variants?
Right. So, Dr. Mavlankar, let me come back to you. So, it's quite clear that we do have a new mutation, but mutations, I mean, can change characteristics, but they don't necessarily change in their entire composition. So, some elements of their behavior, I'm assuming, should be the same, and there may be some new elements. What's your sense, Dr. Mavlankar, in terms of where we are today, and in a way, are we then underprepared given all these new characteristics that we are now seeing?
Yeah. No, I think I agree with Dr. Sanket that given the decline from September to February and arrival of vaccine in January, we were all thinking that the virus is gone. And even some of the senior ministers also mentioned that now we are out of it. Everybody seemed to have changed their behavior. And then mid-February onwards, suddenly we started seeing this rise, which was initially gradual. And then in April, it has really exponential. We can learn what exponential curve looks like. And still, the epidemiologist Bhramar Mukherjee from University of Michigan has predicted that her model show that 1.8 lakh per day, 3 lakh per day cases will happen. And deaths could go up to 3,000, 3,500 or something like that. So we are still not at the peak. And so one thing is that this is a very, very rapid rise, which is not explained only by the second wave, but it is, I'm sure there is some kind of change in the virus. Because now this wave should have been less, because at least 20% of India's population had suffered. Not COVID, but COVID infection, and serosurveillance across the country showed. Plus we had some vaccine coverage. Above 60, at least 70-80% of people are covered with vaccine, and in spite of this, we are seeing this rapid rise. So I think it is very, very worrying, and we have to really rapidly see. The other side is that we don't have hospitalization numbers. One thing missing in Indian data is that we only say positive cases and deaths. There's no idea of how many hospitalization, and that's why, and of course media is showing that many people, and anecdotally also we know that many hospitals are full. There are some places there are only 10-15% ICU beds are vacant, etc., etc. So this other metric, I don't know why India is not able to monitor how many percentage of hospital beds are free or filled, which is a critical thing to save people's lives. The cases will increase, but if your hospital capacity is exceeded, then many people may die at home, which we will be not able to capture.
Right. And is it, again, I'm saying, if I were to ask a Gujarat question, is it the case that people are not even getting tested and reaching a point of no return because maybe they didn't get tested and also did not get the right treatment?
In the big cities, people will get tested. Only thing is now testing laboratory capacities are also overstretched. What we hear is testing laboratories which are doing 800 or 1,000 cases maybe a day are doing 5,000, 10,000, such numbers. So reports are delayed. So reports may take 2-3 days. The second is the laboratories, even private laboratories, after paying will say that we can't send anybody to your home. You have to come to the laboratory and wait in a queue to get tested, because their capacity is also stretched. So there are many reasons that if people delay in testing, they may not get finally the report before they even die, because as Sanket said, many people are rapidly deteriorating, and especially poor people who may not have resources. The public laboratories are also crowded. The other side is the roadside testing, which is very good. They are doing the rapid test. But there are two handicaps to that. One is that sensitivity is 50% to the best rapid test. So 50% of cases we are missing. And another doubt is that if this is a mutant virus, the test sensitivity may be as low as 30% because whatever the genes they are picking up in the rapid test, they may have changed. So that validation of the rapid test also needs to be done by epidemiological and other methods to see that are the rapid tests functioning as well as before. So all those factors, there may be people who are going for testing, turning out to be negative and then finding out later on. The other side is we have no definition in the country, which is really, I want to highlight, as a suspected case of COVID. We have either black or white. You are either not a case, you are a case. Even if your HRCT shows your lungs are filled, and anybody can say that this is nothing except COVID, they should be labeled as suspected cases. In chikungunya, we had suspected and confirmed. So 2 levels of definition or even 3 levels of definition. Probable case, suspected case and confirmed case. Probable means a health worker sees, not a doctor. Suspected is when a doctor sees and confirms through clinical diagnosis, and confirmed is who has laboratory diagnosis. So I think we somehow have missed this whole thing. There is a whole spectrum, and that's why many people, as you said, may be positive but getting missed, especially in rural areas. Sometimes the rural samples have to go to the next district to get tested and come back. So all of that reason there would be. And of course, there are asymptomatic cases.
Right. Okay. And I'll come back to that in a second. Dr. Mankad, you know, the anecdotally, the fatalities that we're seeing, and I'm now asking really about Ahmedabad or Gujarat, are these younger people in your sense compared to what we would have seen last time broadly, or is it the same age profile?
No, by and large, it is the same age profile. I think age more than 65 years, right? The patients who are with comorbidities like diabetes, hypertension, patients with coronary artery disease, patients who are immunosuppressed. I think these are the major, this forms the major chunk of the pie diagram if you draw it out, right? One notable thing could be that the prevalence of mortality in the younger ones could range between 0 to 10% this time in this particular wave, if you see currently. So by and large, it is the susceptible age group that remains. But the newer thing is this, that the invasion of the virus into the lungs in young adults also is being seen pretty quickly. And earlier we used to find a CT scan to be positive at 5th or 6th day or 7th day, as sir mentioned, that a suspected COVID patient, that is a negative COVID PCR or a negative COVID antigen test, right? But a positive HRCT, that is, what is a positive HRCT with a ground glassing opacity, typical ground glassing opacities with subpleural locations for COVID-19 infections. So currently we can see at 3 or 4 days the HRCT also coming as positive. So that indicates the rapidity of the invasion of the respiratory epithelium straight away by this particular virus. Is it the same COVID-19 virus or the variant one? That needs to be defined by the genetic community that is in charge of DNA sequencing as of now.
Right, but you're saying therefore that while the virus is moving faster with younger people, they're also recovering, at least from your experience?
Well, definitely they are recovering if it gets diagnosed early. They get treatment in time, right? And as I think sir said, patients who are in the periphery of any of the state, they definitely take certain time. The TAT, that is turnaround time of the test, is also very important. Currently, all the labs are saturated, in fact, hyper saturated. So the delivery of the RT-PCR report might require 36 hours to 72 hours. So if in between this, if an individual worsens, it might be very difficult to pick out that particular individual in the current setting. Secondly, see, remdesivir is not just the only injection which saves the life. The combo effect of the anti-inflammatory therapy, the vitamins, along with the supportive right? So it is very much imperative that we understand and put into perspective that it is not just the SAV that is going to be helpful in this particular situation. It is the combo of entire, it is a combination of oxygen therapy, combination of antioxidants, that is vitamins, combination of anti-inflammatory drugs. You know that IV dexamethasone was the first trial which showed a difference in mortality benefit. Mortality benefit was shown by IV dexamethasone, right? So these are the drugs that also can save the lives of individuals. In addition to that, some tertiary level of evidence is emerging for IL-6 inhibitors like tocilizumab. Other immunomodulatory therapies are also available. So if an individual reaches in time, finds a bed, right, and good doctors, the good pulmonologists, intensivists or ID specialists, right, in a good setup, right, there is every chance that the patients will be saved out in this situation also.
Right. Okay. Dr. Maulankar, let me come back to you. You've argued that as we vaccinate, and since they're really, apart from all the other behavioral interventions, that's really the only solution going forward. You've argued that we should really focus our vaccination efforts on a fixed number of districts, or rather 50 districts where, let's say, majority of the cases are even in the country at this point, rather than spreading them out evenly. You argued this a few weeks ago. What's the sense that you're getting? I mean, you feel that there could be some pickup for this approach?
There is unfortunately not much discussion on this. See, the purpose of vaccination is two ways. One, and before vaccination came, there was a huge debate on herd immunity. When will we reach herd immunity? Are we reaching herd immunity? Now, vaccination is the purpose of one vaccination purpose is to reach herd immunity. Second purpose of vaccination is to protect individuals, and these are two different strategies. What we have gone for is protecting older individuals, which Western countries also did because they have smaller populations. And you then start with 60 above, then now we have come to 45 and above. But the transmission is happening in the younger people. So even if you vaccinate everybody above 45, the transmission may not stop because you have not reached the herd immunity. So what we argued, myself and our statistician, Dr. Awasthi, did these calculations that out of 740 districts of India, there are top 50 districts where maximum cases of COVID and COVID deaths have happened. If you add them up, it is just 6% of the total districts. But they have 60% of the cases and 60% of the deaths 2 months ago. Now it may have changed a little bit. So the whole idea is the same as Pareto principle. So you pick up those 60% of 60 or 50 districts and vaccinate everybody above 15 years or 18 years of age, so that you reach herd immunity in those 50 districts and not all over. Because vaccinating somebody who is very old in a district in Assam or Meghalaya or Tripura where there are very few cases doesn't protect him. He doesn't require protection. Whereas a person in Bombay, Delhi, Ahmedabad, Surat who is very highly endemic area, you need vaccination there. So that was our argument. With limited vaccine, if we can protect this, for example, I'm just giving hypothetical example, we have done 10 crore vaccines. One strategic choice could have been that give all 10 crores to only Maharashtra and Punjab, or Maharashtra, Punjab and Kerala. These were the three top states at that time. Anyway, you are not going to give below 15 years of 18 years of age because it is not approved for that age group. That is about 40% of that population. Now remains 60% of the population. You give within 10 crores, you could have wiped out the disease in these three states, and that would have reduced because they would have reached herd immunity, and that would have reduced the disease by about 50 to 60%, if not more. So what I'm trying to say is this whole idea that whole country should equally get everything is epidemiologically not very correct if you have limited vaccine. And how much vaccine we had when we started? We have 10 crore doses roughly in stock in December and January. How many doses we require to vaccinate everybody above 18? 200 crore doses. because we have about 100 crore people above 18 years in the whole of the country. So our strategy, if we want to vaccinate everybody, you will require 200 crore doses. Now, where will you get 200 crore doses? No country has such a large vaccine manufacturing, etc. So it will be a 5-year program to do that. And still then the virus may mutate and produce new versions which may become, the vaccine may become less effective. So that's why I had said that focus on those districts. Even now, if we focus on even top 10 places where maximum cases are happening, vaccinate everybody above 18 years of age, we will reduce it substantially. And exactly this is what had done. Of course, disease is different in smallpox eradication. It was called ring vaccination. When the whole world tried to vaccinate everybody in the whole world with smallpox, it was not possible in the 70s. So they identified where cases are happening, and just around their houses, you vaccinate 200, 300 houses around where a case has happened. And by doing that, they got rid of smallpox. So it's similar strategy which I have suggested and argued.
Right. Okay, we're running out of time. Let me get some final comments from both of you. Dr. Mankad, you've already talked about the SMS, the sanitizing, social mask and social distancing. But at this point, what should people be doing apart from taking these precautions, and what are the symptoms they should be looking out, given that the virus is still spreading fast, and how should they be reacting, and what should they not be doing?
See, the most important thing is the SMSV, that is sanitization along with social distancing, masking and vaccination. I think as sir suggested, see, vaccination is the key if we want to eliminate or eradicate this particular disease from the surface of the earth, just leave India alone. Right. So vaccination is the strategy. One more thing is this, that vaccination might not prevent infection, but it definitely reduces the incidence of serious disease. I think what we are worried more about than COVID-19 is the serious disease. And what is the serious disease? That is the involvement of the lungs and multi-organ dysfunction syndrome. So vaccination at least prevents that. So that is very important perspective from a clinician's viewpoint, right? Because patients are not getting sick, and patients are not getting admitted to the ICUs. They are not requiring oxygen if they are vaccinated, if they have enough antibodies to fight for. And therefore, SMSV should be the current mantra by which I think India should go forward. And definitely that is what we are focusing currently in Gujarat also.
Okay. Dr. Mavlankar, last word. What should we be doing now at this point of time, even as we grapple with a vaccine shortage?
As I said, different vaccination strategy, but with one V, I will add two more Vs. One is ventilation, which is not so much emphasized because many people are getting infected in a closed spaces, air-conditioned places. So in spite of air condition, you must have windows, doors open, as much ventilation as possible. Second, I would say double masking. I would even go further, or use N95 if you can. And lastly, vulnerable population, third V, whatever are the vulnerable, because people who are younger in the family have to go out to earn. The older people, the sick people, the comorbid people have to be protected as much as possible. So these are the, I think, strategies. Plus, if required, lockdown word has become very bad, but restrictions. One can say that no more than 4 people should gather together. Given the tsunami of the cases, even at a shop, we have all forgotten. Earlier we had these circles and people used to stand in that. All of that is forgotten. So bring it back, that very serious social distancing. Don't go out without any pressing reason. So be protected as much as possible.
Right. Dr. Mankad, Dr. Mavlankar, thank you so much for joining me, and I do hope to speak to you again.
Thank you.